stopped with me.
A full salvo from an Ohio-class submarine, which could be launched in less than 1 minute, could unleash up to 192 nuclear warheads to wipe 24 cities off the map.
The tripartite alliance between the United States, the UK and Australia for the building of these horrendous war machines should have the initials in the acronym arranged in that order: US, UK, Australia. You sucker. Because we have been suckered into the most obscene expenditure on killing machines in Australia's history, and they will serve probably no useful purpose whatsoever, because by the time they actually come into service, technology will have surpassed their usefulness. They will be detectable and destructible very quickly. Australia's Defence Force is now fully integrated into the United States Defence Force. Richard Marles has gone even further and has said that the United States Defence Force and the Australian Defence Force are interchangeable. That means the identity of the one is subsumed into the identity of the other. And that means that all of the United States assets emplaced in Australia for use in a potential war against China can be cloaked in the Australian flag. US assets in Australia are indistinguishable from Australian assets. So we become the patsy, we become the proxy, the protagonist in a war against China, decided on by America.
I think it's important to talk about what we can do. I don't think we can change the direction of American policy. I think American policy is in fact going to be very chaotic in the coming decades. We've seen one Trump, we're going to see another one with his name, or just version 2.0. Those in Canberra, in the confidence of the United States, which of course includes the Cabinet and the top of the Defence and Foreign Affairs Department, believe that the United States can be managed by a set of safe hands who got us through Trump. That's delusional, I think. I think that in fact we're going to see very serious turbulence, if you like, in the United States. And that's going to, if not wreck, it's going to damage the underpinnings of alliance. I think that there are going to be events which are going to put forward the idea that certainly Hugh White would agree with, and I would sort of nominate, that we do have to think about an independent Australian foreign policy. And one of the things which I found encouraging, apart from David's film, for which I thank you greatly, is the array of younger actors. I'm the kind of greybeard, well, I shaved the beard off actually, but you know, in the greybeard territory, as I believe John is, forgive me, for this. But I was really impressed in that film about the younger people I met. We saw there, like Kelly Tanter, the extraordinary solicitor from Newcastle, who has done amazing work with freedom of information documents to unpick the truth about our relationship via Christopher Pyne to the war in the UAE, in Yemen, pursued by the UAE. Like Michelle Fay, who with the extraordinary work she's doing with a group called Undue Influence, of documenting the underhanded, round, behind the back influence of the lobbyists in Canberra. I think Shirley Winton is out there somewhere, and Shirley and her colleagues in the Independent Peaceful Australia Network are responsible for this extraordinary report of the IPAN People's Inquiry into the Alliance. It's a remarkable piece of work, just showing you what a range of people in Australia are thinking and trying to do about this. That's what gives me some confidence that there is going to be some way out of this. On the question of AUKUS, I think that there's an optimistic view. I've heard some people in Canberra talking about the last few days on the phone, talking to people about what can be done. One optimistic view is that the only actual money which has been put down by Albanese is in the forward estimates, the next 4 years from the budget coming out in May, of about $9 billion. Now, you and I think $9 billion is quite a lot of money, but Defence wastes that every couple of weeks, I suspect, on cost overruns, white elephants, and botched jobs. The argument is that Albanese and co have seen the trap that AUKUS represents and are pushing out the real spends a long, long way away, hoping that events will allow them to get out through a back door. This unbelievably incalculable cost. Who knows what the dollar's going to be worth in 40 years' time? So how can you possibly put a number on it? When the government begins to realise how much that's going to cramp the possibilities of anything decent in health, education and environment, then we will see people beginning to get involved in not just a peace movement, but a movement to change the direction of what's happening here.
I think it was really interesting to watch the film. I'm 28, going on 29 this year. The most I hear on my Instagram feed about China is about TikTok and China, and maybe having TikTok on my phone will mean that China's watching my every move, rather than the seriousness of nukes or submarines or AUKUS, as we've heard today. So I think it was a really powerful film. And thank you for having us and for making it, and it was wonderful. The other point I wanted to make was that the other thing I saw in the film today was that there was footage there that I had never seen before. There was the bombs coming out during the Vietnam War.
Good to hear some wise heads like Richard Tanter and others, Hugh White in particular, who has been a scourge of ASPI, therefore is a good man. But just three things I wanted to pick up. Firstly, that famous speech of Eisenhower about the military-industrial complex and about it taking over. Well, sadly, he'd be turning in his grave, because in Australia the military-industrial complex runs the show. In fact, Bob said to me the other day when he was trying to put money in one of those complicated parking meters, that when you go to Canberra now, and he's right, when you go to Canberra now and you see the drivers waiting to take people places and they hold their signs up, they're all defence companies. You know, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, Department of Defence. The other issue that occurs to me is that ASPI, what's disgraceful about ASPI is the way that the journalists, the ABC included, when they quote somebody from ASPI, never declare the fact that they are completely 100% funded by either the Department of Defence or alternatively defence companies. That's their funding base. Why isn't ASPI doing it? Why is ASPI continually put up as some sort of expert? Peter Jennings is not an expert. Peter Jennings is peddling like a parrot to within an inch of its life the interests of the defence industries in Australia and the Department of Defence. There's nothing independent about this group. And it says everything about Richard Marles, and I'm going to come to Richard now, because Richard Marles, who you saw in the film, would have to be, and has revealed himself to be in the last 24 to 48 hours, one of the shallowest thinkers in Australian politics. He said on the weekend, well, one of the reasons that we need to spend billions of dollars that our children and grandchildren and their children will be paying for, because we've thrown, as Margaret says, you know, we've thrown the idea that you ought to look after your budget and the budget for the future, we've thrown that out the window, but to spend money on cuddling up to Washington. Richard Marles said it's to defend trade lanes. It's to defend trade lanes. Well, how can it be? On the one hand, you know, this is Australia's biggest trading partner. So do you think it's in the interests of the Chinese to block iron ore? They buy Australian iron ore by the millions of bucket loads on a daily basis. Do you really think they're going to indulge in a war to cut off this supply? I mean, so that's the first fantasy. Then he said yesterday, and I don't know if you saw it, Phil Curry had it in the Financial Review, he said, oh, well, partly the reason we've got to do this is the fall of Hawke and Keating, because they opened up the economy. So now what we have is we have all these shipping routes around the place, and we have China going out into the region, and and we have free trade. I mean, this is just nonsensical. And no wonder Keating, last week, in his own inimitable style, and if you haven't watched it, you should watch it, ripped into Miles, Wong and Albanese, and rightly so, because, I mean, Margaret knows better. That's where the Labor Party has gone. And when you see sensible voices like Keating, like Margaret, like Bob Carr, I was talking to Robert Tickner about it last week as well. When you see those voices saying, what are we doing? Where has this party gone? You realise that Paul Keating's right when he said when Billy Hughes first split the Labor Party back in 1916-17 over conscription, that's where this issue is heading. And you just hope that some wiser heads and some smarter thinkers, and also people who care about this planet, let's not forget that, within the Labor Party and within the caucus, start to voice real opposition to something that should never, ever become a fait accompli in this country.
Thank you, David. And I think that whatever else, the film is vitally important to get a debate going in Australia that's been denied by the Albanese government, before that by the Morrison government. They've been making decisions with these armaments corporations, and it's true. If you go to Canberra, when you're going up or down the escalators, have a look. It's Raytheon and the other armaments companies who own the signage within the airport through which every politician goes and every bureaucrat goes. And it's totally corrupt. And it is corrupting. And that a great party of the people, like the Labor Party, could have as its leaders hoist this $268 billion nuclear armaments deal. That's effectively what it is. Taken from the last government, the Morrison government, for goodness sake, on the people of Australia without a debate is an appalling state of affairs. We are in an existential crisis on this planet. We human beings cannot survive with a house divided. We cannot be fighting each other in a resource-depleted planet, and we're seeing the results of that. And there are good hearts all around this planet.